We think of money as this abstract thing, but at its heart, it's really just a promise. It's a claim on energy and resources in the future. But how do you keep that promise honest? It turns out, for over 100 years, some of the world's sharpest minds have been obsessed with that very question, trying to find a real-world anchor for money. So let's follow this incredible story from a forgotten chemist all the way to a potential solution a century in the making.
Okay, I know that sounds like a weird question, right? A rusting machine in your bank account. But the answer actually gets to the very heart of a deep, fundamental conflict in our entire financial system. A conflict between the physical world, where things decay, and the financial world, which, on paper at least, can just grow and grow forever. So, our story actually kicks off way back in 1926 with a Nobel Prize-winning chemist, of all people, a guy named Soddy. Now, he spent the first part of his life literally splitting atoms, but he spent the second half trying to figure out why our financial systems were, in his view, destined to break. He was applying the laws of physics to economics, and for his trouble, well, he was pretty much ignored for 100 years.
All right, so this is the absolute core of what Soddy was getting at. On one side, you've got real wealth, the stuff in the physical world. It follows the laws of physics. Machines rust, grain rots, everything breaks down. It takes work just to maintain it. But then, on the other side, you have money and debt. And that world, it follows the laws of pure mathematics. A loan grows at compound interest forever, completely disconnected from what's happening to that real wealth. The numbers on the ledger just keep going up, even while the actual machinery rusts away.
And Soddy called this the central paradox of the whole system, this growing gap, this gap between the promises on the financial ledger and what the physical world can actually deliver. Well, it can't stay open forever. Eventually, reality always catches up. And when that gap snaps shut, it's often painful. It happens through things like massive inflation, widespread bankruptcy, or even war.
So, that was the big question that kept guys like Soddy up at night. If you accept his premise that real production is just energy, organized into useful things, then how on earth do you build a money system that actually reflects that physical truth? A system that can't be cheated.
And believe it or not, that one question kicked off this century-long hunt for an answer, a search that was filled with absolutely brilliant ideas that, in the end, all fell short. So let's take a look at the history of these attempts.
And look, this wasn't some fringe idea we're talking about. You had early theories about tying money to human labor. For most of history, we had the gold standard, which worked precisely because gold is so ridiculously energy-intensive to get out of the ground. Then you had actual titans of industry like Henry Ford and Thomas Edison proposing an energy currency backed by a hydroelectric dam. In the 30s, there was this radical movement called technocracy that wanted non-transferable energy certificates. And even more recently, you have the petrodollar system, which created this indirect link by making sure the world had to use dollars to buy oil.
I mean, think about it. When Thomas Edison, one of the most practical, down-to-earth inventors in all of history, says something like this, you know the problem was real. He got it. He knew a dollar was just a claim on something else. And he was asking the most important question. What should that claim be anchored to?
So you have all these brilliant ideas from some of the world's greatest minds, and yet every single one failed. Why? Well, they all fell into the same exact trap, a single structural flaw that we can call the gatekeeper problem.
Let's just break it down, case by case. Take gold. As soon as you let banks and governments hold it for you, they just couldn't resist the temptation to print more paper promises than they had actual gold. Those energy certificates? Well, you needed a central committee with almost godlike knowledge of the entire economy to make it work, an impossible task. The petrodollar? It wasn't backed by physics. It was backed by military might and political deals. And even modern ideas like carbon markets, they became political footballs, totally gameable and distorted by whoever had the most influence.
You see the pattern here, right? Here's the fatal flaw. Every single one of these systems needed a trusted human gatekeeper. A person, a committee, a government, someone had to stand in the middle and say, yep, this money is linked to that anchor. But give it enough time, put it under enough pressure, and that role always shifted from just verifying the link to managing it. And once you can manage the ledger, the temptation to rig the game is just too much to resist.
For a solid century, this just seemed like an unsolvable problem. It really looked like any system designed by humans would eventually fall victim to human flaws. You couldn't build an honest anchor because you always needed a gatekeeper, and that gatekeeper could always be corrupted or pressured.
Until someone figured out how to get rid of the gatekeeper completely.
And this right here, this is the fundamental shift in thinking that changed everything. The old model was all about institutional trust. You had to trust a group of people, a government, a bank, to tell you the ledger was correct. The new model, it's about mathematical verification. You don't have to trust anyone. The system proves to you that the ledger is correct using the cold, hard laws of math and physics.
Then, in 2008, this anonymous paper drops describing a peer-to-peer electronic cash system called Bitcoin. But what most people missed at first was that buried deep inside its code was the solution to Soddy's century-old problem, a brand new mechanism called proof of work.
Okay, so how does this actually work? Well, it's actually pretty brilliant in its simplicity. To add new transactions to the ledger and create new monetary units, a miner has to solve an incredibly difficult computer puzzle. To solve that puzzle, you have to use a ton of computing power, which means you have to spend a massive, provable amount of real-world electricity. Once it's solved, everyone else on the network can check the answer instantly and verify that the energy was spent. And here is the absolute breakthrough. The ledger can only move forward when that real physical work is done. There's no committee that can just waive the requirement or decide to add a few zeros to the balance sheet.
And that right there, that's the whole ballgame. Unlike every other attempt we've looked at, proof of work doesn't need a trusted party holding the gold. It doesn't need a central planning committee like the technocrats wanted. It doesn't rely on geopolitical power like the petrodollar. The verification is done by math, and it's spread out across the entire network. It finally removes the gatekeeper.
And just like that, we've come full circle, right back to our chemist, Frederick Soddy, and his uncomfortable observation from way back in 1926. It turns out we finally have the missing piece to his century-old puzzle.
All right, so let's tie it all together. How does this crazy system of decentralized mathematical verification finally close that dangerous gap between decaying wealth and endlessly compounding debt?
It's simple, really. The connection between the money on the books and the real world, it's not guaranteed by a fallible group of humans anymore. Instead, it's enforced directly by the laws of mathematics and thermodynamics. The cost to create a new claim on the system is physical, it's irreversible, and it's verifiable by absolutely anyone.
And that is what solves the paradox head-on. These financial claims can no longer multiply out of control, way faster than the real-world work they're supposed to represent. Why? Because to create a new claim, you have to provide a direct input from that real world, in the form of energy. The map, for the first time, is forced to actually reflect the territory.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last massive question. Our old financial systems, they were all built to manage scarcity, right? To figure out how to distribute not enough. This new kind of system, it creates honest accounting for what we actually produce. But in a world where technology is creating unbelievable abundance, maybe the real challenge isn't about producing more, but about fairly distributing the value of what we already have. An honest ledger is an incredible first step, but figuring out how to use it to manage abundance, well, that's a whole new puzzle for us to solve.